But I did click share sound and optimize. Ray from Kutztown University, and I'll be talking about navigating web accessibility lessons learned from a community of practice. Lesson 1, community of practices are fun. So CRPs are when faculty from different areas and different departments, we came together for 3 months. We were in person, it was not on Zoom, that we would be able to share our experiences, share our time together, and share some discussion points of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this had short-term and long-term values. And my research that I was looking in deeper to was for a specific class. So you could pick a syllabus, a lesson plan, or a project. I chose a class project for my Intro to Interactive class. I started by with an equity audit of looking at our student population and then looking at the importance of web accessibility. I specifically looked at WCAG's guidelines. We are teaching at Kutztown University. We are in between New York and Philadelphia in a very rural area. We have about 6,000 full-time students and 1,400 in the visual and performing arts. So lesson 2 that I learned is I asked Disability Services to give me some stats. What are the breakdown of disabilities in the visual and performing arts? And lesson 2 was that 16% of visual and performing arts majors are registered with Disability Services. That was a really large number, I thought, that I was not aware of. I also looked at what these disabilities were, and I found that many of them were psychological, meaning anxiety, depression, learning disabilities. Lesson 3 that I learned is real world problems. This does translate into the real world. The ADA Title III website accessibility lawsuits are on a complete uptick since 2017. A really well-known case is Mr. Rubles, who was a blind man who was trying to order a pizza in multiple instances on the Domino's website and was unsuccessful. This is Domino's had a complete rehaul of their website and their ordering process due to this lawsuit. There's been other case studies, like Virgin Airlines created this wonderful iconography that could be slipped into passports and worn as a pin. And this was to show that not all disabilities are something you can see. There's hidden disabilities, and this discrete identifier would help some passengers and let the staff be aware that these individuals might need extra assistance. The project that I took on is a project I've been doing for years, which is an extreme makeover website edition. And they needed to find an horribly ugly website on the internet, and we were going to redesign it, something with some good bones that we could make beautiful and now add this extra layer of web accessibility. So lesson 4 that I learned is students do not think about accessibility when they design at all. They love putting the entire rainbow, they love everything to overlap, and they love to treat it like a postmodern poster. And I really tried to hone them in a little bit on some perceivability, first layer. So lesson 5 is I learned a large amount of men are colorblind. So 1 in 12, that's 8%. Someone in our COP, a male, was colorblind, and it was great to have this open discussion with him about what he sees in some of his life experiences of being colorblind and how design affects that. Ton of helpful links that I'm happy to share. I have a couple in here. Some of Design Incubation shared some more that I have a running list. In Figma, it is wonderful. They have some plugins that you could use, like this Addy or some color contrast checkers to ensure that you are choosing the best colors for the visually impaired. This one you can eyedropper right from your website or Figma page. Operable areas. So you want to ensure your touch targets are large enough and within reach. 42 pixels squared is the smallest size for CTAs, icons, your Facebook, Instagram logo. Understandable, designing for users with anxiety and dyslexia. Since we do have a very high population of students that are experiencing anxiety, I had an open discussion with the class about this, and we talked about what could give students anxiety or moments of anxiety when looking at websites. Also, dyslexia, there's been research about what fonts work best for dyslexic individuals, non-italic, etc. Lesson learned, number 6, hierarchy is king. It really is super important to have a dramatic hierarchy on your website. This helps with screen readers, it helps with SEO, it helps with accessibility, it helps with individuals with anxiety. It's king. Finally, for this class project, we looked at usability testing with our classmates, parents, roommates. We utilized the SUS form that can be found on usability.gov. It's a 10-question questionnaire that has a rating system that if you have a 68 or above, your website is considered to be accessible and thought out for usability testing. Here's a few before and after. In lesson 7, it's a process, working with students to create fun and creative concepts, but also be web accessible. It's still a process. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anna Jordan. I'm an assistant professor in the MFA Visual Communication Design program at Rochester Institute of Technology. Today, I'll share a project with you that I call Mining for Ideas. This is a project that I teach in my course, Design Systems. On the first day of the course, I ask my graduate students, what is the hardest part about being a graphic designer? And the most common answer I hear is the challenge of coming up with ideas. So I am passionate about giving my students all sorts of strategies for ideation and iteration that they could take with them and apply to future projects. Strategies that are flexible and reliable and will ensure that they're never at a loss for ideas. This is an example of that. This project is inspired by 3 things. First, my own design process in book cover design, in which I explore mixing analog and digital ways of working, and various morphologies that I've designed for myself and use in my process. Second, the surrealist exquisite corpse drawing game, in particular, the collaborative aspect of this game and the freedom that participants experience when they're able to create art without knowing what it will be. And the third inspiration for this project is the work of Nancy Skolos and Thomas Waddell, the way that they work from form to content and their innovative collage process that they've taken around the world in the form of a poster design workshop that starts with a collage. Mining for Ideas begins with a first day of class workshop that's all about collaborative form making. Each student is given a sheet of paper and a bag with different art supplies in it, and we sit around a big table that fits everyone, and I set my timer for 2 minutes. The instructions are, you have 2 minutes to alter the paper in front of you using only what is in your bag. At the end of 2 minutes, pass your paper to the right, and we repeat this until everyone is reunited with their original paper. Very quickly, the table becomes a mess and everyone loosens up. People are chatting, people's hands are getting dirty, I turn music on. It's a really fun vibe. And the results of these collaborative collages are both beautiful and grotesque. The flat pieces of paper turn into these very sculptural objects. Each collage is touched by every person in the room It's altered by each student, and they're full of beautiful moments of form. At the end of the workshop, I received positive feedback. The students really enjoy it. They have a lot of fun, and it's unusual for them to be able to get their hands dirty like this in class. So they really enjoy it. I purposely fill the bags with a wide variety of art supplies to make sure that each collage includes many design elements. Every collage will include many examples of type, an image, and line quality, texture, pattern, color, form, opacity, dimensionality, and more. They're very rich, full of all sorts of interesting moments. Then we take one of these collages and we bring it into Photoshop. And I show the students how we can zoom in to look at this collage at an impossible scale. And I pan around this collage, and anytime we see a moment that looks interesting, maybe it's a nice piece of type or an interesting color combination or an exciting arrangement of positive and negative form, we stop and we take a screenshot. We essentially take a crop out of this collage. And the students go home and do this for homework with their own collage. They come back with 20 different crops, gems of ideas, as if they're miners that have gone through their collage with a flashlight and a chisel looking for valuable gems. And then for each of those crops, they make a list of possible content. And at this point, I give them their design assignment. And this could become anything. It could be a book cover, a poster. It could even be an interior design project, an architecture project. It's very flexible. The point is we're drawing inspiration from form and then adding content to it and creating a piece of design. So for the sake of this presentation, I'm showing work from this past spring in which students designed a series of 3 billboards for a cultural event. We take that crop and we use it as a guide to create a first draft. And then once we have a first draft of the design, that's when we begin our iteration phase. And it's at this point that I teach the students how they can design a morphology for themselves. We talk about how morphologies are useful as scaffolding to build iteration. And in this particular assignment, I asked them to structure their iteration around concrete design elements. So we talk about those same design elements that we found in the collages, and I have them build their morphology around that. They analyze their first draft, and they make a list in 2 columns, design elements that are consistent and design elements that vary across this trio of billboards. And then they make a plan, a morphology for themselves in which they can take design elements and move them from one category to another. So elements that were consistent become variables, elements that were variables become consistent. And this gives them a very concrete plan that they can make myriad iterations from following this structure. The results are beautiful and interesting and different than but they would be had the students followed a different process. So it leads them to exciting designs. And some of the feedback that I have gotten about this project comes from written student reflections. And there are several common themes that I can pull from this. Students really enjoy learning about how they can find inspiration everywhere. They love working with analog tools. This is successful in helping them relieve the anxiety of the blank page. That morphology of reshuffling design elements is really helpful to them. And they enjoy the collaborative aspect that leads them to surprising ideas. Most importantly, they see the value in this method and how they can apply it to future projects. I hope that's helpful to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Everyone, my name is Eugene Park, and I'm a faculty in graphic design at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, where I teach classes in data visualization and interaction design. In this presentation, I'll be talking about storytelling with data and motion graphics through a graphic design practice and pedagogy perspective. In the data visualization class that I teach every year to seniors and grad students, every project that we do is an exercise in storytelling. For a long time, the outcomes of this class were printed posters or static web prototypes that presented several visualizations that consisted of curated graphs that altogether told a unified story on a particular topic. And the inspiration to develop a motion graphics driven project actually came from a quote attributed to Paul Klee, where he simply said that a line is a dot that went for a walk. This quote is likely connected to his pedagogical sketchbook from 1923, where he demonstrated the dynamic and mathematical qualities of a line. But it also speaks to the versatile attributes of simple geometric shapes that are commonly used as the building blocks in data visualization. So a dot can be moved to form a line, and a line can be stretched to form a plane, and then the plane can be morphed into other shapes. And understanding this simple concept serves as a foundation in which we can animate data-driven graphics. Finding great examples of animated data visualizations can be quite difficult because they're few and far in between. But when executed properly, applying animations can be an effective strategy to show changes in the data or show different layers within the data. So for example, this climate change spiral visualization created by NASA shows rising global temperatures in a clear manner, but also presents itself in a very unique format. And I'm just going to fast forward a video to kind of show what I mean here. So in an effort to get our graphic design students to explore how storytelling with data can also exist in a kinetic medium, I put together a project where they had to create animated video for the web that spans somewhere between 1 to 2 minutes. And they had to explain a very particular topic using data as the primary content. Students were free to use publicly available data sets like the websites that we're showing here, or any other websites as long as they're from a reliable source. Once the students have selected a data set, they would then prepare the data through Tableau Prep, where they clean the data by identifying the specific categories or variables that they need for their analysis and reformatting it if necessary. Once that is done, then they would take the cleaned up data set to Tableau Desktop or a Python script if they're very proficient with programming. And then they would analyze and visualize the data. This is where students will test out any hypothesis that will form the backbone of their stories. The rough graphs produced at this point will then be imported into Illustrator, where students can polish the graph and storyboard their animations. And then in the final step is importing the assets from Illustrator to After Effects to produce the animation. During the storyboarding stage, cognitive load theory, which is the concept that students have already learned from the user experience course, can be applied. So students are challenged to reduce intrinsic cognitive load by breaking down the content and making sure that each scene doesn't present an excessive amount of data. Students are also reminded to minimize extraneous cognitive load by making sure that the visualizations don't have too much detail or aren't too experimental. Through storyboarding, students not only get to plot out the narrative arc of their animations, but they also have the chance to work with figure-ground relationships, and they are also expected to treat graphs as images to establish signifiers and metaphors that can reinforce the overall tone or message behind the animation. So in this particular sequence, the decision to transform a horizontal bar graph into a silhouette of a gun was a nice touch. And when presenting a dense graph or map, students are advised to filter the visual into smaller multiples, making it easier for viewers to process the scene. Unlike traditional motion graphics projects, data visualization requires intentional pauses to allow viewers to catch up and process what they see. So just like in any UX class, students have to test their clips with their peers to make sure that the pacing of the animation is appropriate. So in closing, this project brings together the formal qualities of graphic design, UX principles and methods, empirical thinking, animation, and storytelling all into a 1 to 2 minute video. And the intention is to equip students with experience and tools to engage audiences with data beyond static presentations. So thank you all for watching, and I look forward to our discussion in New York.
Thank you, everybody. So Camila will start the Q&A. Oh, thank you. So participants and attendees, please jump in with questions or comments.
Yeah, so I guess I can start with asking a question to each of the three presenters, and then we can open it up for the audience or other presenters to ask each other. And I want to start with a question for Danielle. First, thank you all for putting together your presentations. This 6-minute format is great to really learn what you did. But Danielle, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about how the community of practice facilitated, informed, or influenced the way that you designed the class project.
I mean, meeting with those peers twice a month and talking through my process of what I was thinking was the most helpful. Because we had it was visual performing arts. So we had the film department there, the music department there, music ed, fine art. So their input on web accessibility was very interesting. Because they were not familiar with a lot of the rules of the web. So the community of practice was kind of invaluable that way, with their feedback and their suggestions of what to concentrate and not concentrate on, specifically with the disabilities. So that was something we discussed a lot in our COP, was how we could be inclusive to all the students in the visual and performing arts. So it was a really good safe space to discuss our lesson plans, and they've done it several times after my university. So it wasn't just a once and done, to try to have everybody participate and talk to their peers about how to just do little changes. Everyone came in at first wanting to change their whole course and like make it extremely DEI friendly. But we came to realize that if you just pick one thing, one small thing to change, that was the most, it was successful then. It wasn't as overwhelming.
Okay, thank you, Danielle. This question is for Anna. Anna, your workshop seems like a great way to get the students away from the screens, involved with their hands. I was wondering how, in your observation of the class's work, how much do you see their initial proppings into the final work? And have you noticed any patterns or common approaches to the visual language that your students create with the assignment?
Some of the examples were quite close to the original crops. The Food and Wine Festival posters that I showed today, Ipshita's work, were very close to the original in terms of the grid structure. And then others are more conceptually inspired, and their final pieces may not look anything like their collage, but maybe the color palette or a little detail about typography is inspired. So it really just depends on the student, and I encourage my students to take the techniques that I'm sharing with them and use what's helpful to them. So, if they're not interested in analog and digital synthesis, they don't have to make something off of the computer. They're welcome to use AI or 3D rendering to make their work. But the thing that all of us share in this process is the idea that we can find inspiration in these collages that we can translate into whatever medium and method is interesting and intuitive to us as individual designers.
Thank you, Anna. This question is for Eugene, so I'm gonna.
The mic up here.
Those okay. So yeah, we need to get him in the mic because he's here in the room. So I guess I'll ask the question while you figure out the. How to.
That I just come over there.
Yeah, if we let's try just for. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So Eugene, working with the data sets, the visualization, and the motion implies like a wide range of skills that your students need to develop. So I was curious to know, how do you balance out that aspect with the creating engaging narratives part of the work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that when it comes to data, especially with our students, this is their first time working with data outside of a traditional statistics class. So one of the things that was kind of challenging, especially in the first couple of, maybe like the first 2 weeks as students are generating ideas, is that they sometimes approach it from this dry, like, I'm going to explain this kind of concept and usually use like the graphs to kind of like explain themselves. But eventually that kind of runs into a couple of problems in terms of like, you can't just show like a whole like line graph, for example, especially if there's like a lot of dense data, because with motion, you have to like keep it moving, and you really need to like make really clear on like what the user needs to see, like what kinds of trends, or is there any particular moment in the graph that you really need to focus on, and how does that connect to the actual message that you want to communicate with them? So as we're kind of having that conversation, then we can have a dialogue on what are the things that are worth kind of presenting, the like most important ideas and insights. Because after all, this is only a 1 to 2 minute video. You can't just pack in like everything there is to know about that particular data set. So in that moment, we kind of talk about some more kind of dynamic strategies that we can do, and also we also kind of go from the standpoint that I think the writer David Mamet kind of has like this saying that that a story doesn't have to have a beginning, middle, and end. Sometimes you can like switch it around. You could go from like a more surprising moment, the most surprising moment, and then you can just kind of walk backwards and kind of create your narrative. So there's certain things, strategies that we can kind of employ, and that could be done on a case-by-case basis there. And can I address some of the questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Heather asked about some of the tools that I'm using. So yeah, we use, there's like 2 applications, both actually from Tableau. One is Tableau Prep, and the other is Tableau Desktop. So Heather, I think Tableau Desktop is the one that I'm sure that you and I are familiar with. The Tableau Prep is this relatively new kind of tool. So that's where we usually, our class used to kind of prepare the data set. So for example, if there are, after students download their data sets, they need to kind of clean it up. And that could mean a variety of things. For example, like, filtering out the columns or the categories that they're using, or if they're enriching the data, then they'll also have like another data set they want to combine to that data set. So Tableau Prep is a kind of a great way to like automate, well, not automate, but like make that process a little bit easier, rather than just finagling with Excel and try to do a lot of I don't know, copy and pasting or other stuff there. Then the timeline for this project. So students have about 5 weeks to work on this project. So it's a little over, well, yeah, about a third of the semester.
Okay. Do we have questions from the audience to any of the 3 presenters, or from anyone, the participants online? Let me see if anyone asked anything over here. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, because I like to hear your webinar.
And please introduce yourself. Hi, Silas Monroe. I am a designer, educator. There's so many amazing presentations, but my question is actually for you, Camila. I found your research was really profound about the history of design incubation and like all of this like lexicon that you uncovered of all the keywords of research and like what is happening now and what is trending in the future. I don't know if you could like comment additionally about this idea of like how the language we use or the nomenclature that happens around design, like how that influences how we might educate or how we might practice design, because it, I don't know, just got me excited. It was delightfully nerdy, and just made me think about like almost like the poetics of the terms we use, but also just like what words keep coming up that we like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you, Silas. I think that one part of that process related to the language that got me like a little bit stuck was like, oh, we seem to be using very general words that are not really meaning much. And that seem to be very broad in the way that we talk about what we do. But I was thinking, and I think it's connected to the mission of design incubation, that even in that language and how we all make like this consensus of how do we call individual areas of practice means that we have to do a lot of effort in talking to each other, on reading each other, on understanding that sometimes what we're describing with certain words is exactly the same thing that someone else is describing in a different way and coming into consensus. So I see it as a place of using the language to understand if we've been using it in a way that is specific, clear enough. If we are like just using words out of, all of those words came from individuals trying to describe their own work, right? We could also create keywords analyzing abstracts in a way that is more like machine oriented. But the part that I liked is that those words came from people, right? And what can we do with that is, I'm very open to the conversation of what else we can do with the language that we use to describe our field. And how part of the intent was like, I wanted to remove all the generals. I'm trying to go narrow down, like trying to zoom in and see, okay, what is really that we're talking about? So what I see is potential and collaboration as an opportunity as well. So if anyone has ideas on how we can continue to work with these words and how they can help us build a bit of a more collaborative way of thinking about the discipline, is something that I'm very open. And I would like to receive more input on that as well, because I was just diving into it blind. It's like, let me see what I can get from here.
Yeah, that was really fascinating. I feel like I just also want to like give kudos to design incubation. I think to all of you that organize this, like, and the presentations, but like ours is writing workshops, like these peer reviews, like the presentations, like there's this culture. I feel like I've gotten to witness more design incubation from the outside, like coming to presentations and not being directly with them, but just seeing all this amazing work and just like I feel like your project just kind of captured how much generosity and like specificity that's like happening here, both like for us, like internally, but also like how it impacts for students or how it's impacting the field. Like there's just like a lot of rigor, but also a lot of generosity and like now I love that you were talking about like the working groups, right? Like of like being able to like incubate and like work at your ideas in a safer space that like give us sort of precision care. That's really cool.
Yeah, and to establish our field, right? Which I think is what we're trying to do here. Thank you for your kind words to design incubation. And,
I just want to say I kind of echo all those thoughts, and yeah, I would certainly have to kind of connect with you to see how we can kind of work together on this, because I actually did a similar project, but with using the articles from Dialectic, of all the articles that was published. And yeah, I certainly have some kind of ideas that we kind of pursue this.
For sure.
Like one kind of study that I'm kind of interested in doing is in addition to the keywords, but also like take all the abstracts that were submitted, and do like a topical analysis and to see if the topics extracted from those abstracts matches with the keywords that's submitted. So it'd be kind of an interesting analysis to see if like the keywords that we pick out as like authors is kind of like I don't know, there's some kind of similarities or discrepancies versus what the algorithm does, and that could have an interesting like,
That would be
discussion.
amazing. I'm thinking that, we have that archive and it's part of the history of our discipline and is how we can not simply let it be, but also reflect back on it and not simply ignore, but just really understand it's all history, where we were, where we are going and how that can help us map the road. Cool. Yeah, I need an expert because I was just trial and error. Okay. Do we have any other questions for the presenters? Let me see, I'm seeing if anyone is asking questions here or to any of the design incubation members. Yes? Yes, please. Or Dan can also bring it closer. We have another question here.
Thanks for all the presentations. They were fantastic. My name is Maurizio. I'm a longtime practitioner and an assistant professor. I guess this question goes to all three of the presenters. In terms of maybe thinking about the prerequisite, I saw the balance of teaching the students what they need to know, and then the end result is, I always struggle with that. Do you have any control or is there any thought of the prerequisites going into that course when you design these projects? Right? For example, in data viz, just the hierarchy and understanding the content alone before you even design it is the process. I don't know if that makes sense to everybody, that question.
Starting off, I think the prerequisites is something that kind of sets the kind of boundaries of like how much I could, or the parameters of how much I can kind of push the students. So in terms of our graphic design students, we do not require our students, undergrad students, to take statistics. I'm sure we could have a debate on whether that's a good idea or not. But at best, like students come in with like almost like high school level like algebra. So that kind of puts me at a bit of a disadvantage because I can't like really push them to like really rigorous statistical analysis. But we do kind of cover some elementary kind of statistics there. And that's what like the first part of the semester is for. So yeah, that really just kind of like does a lot of front loading in terms of just doing that. And in terms of the more kind of graphic design kind of like foundations, whether it's like reminding about visual hierarchy, and also mentioned about using concepts that they've learned from the user experience course to kind of bring into that. That could be challenged, and for a number of students, they do kind of find that overwhelming on how they could like take all these different kind of concepts from their different courses and then just kind of merge them together in this single kind of project. And I hope that this is not cop out, but I always just kind of remind them when students are struggling is in addition to like, giving them one-on-one advice is to kind of remind them that, this is a field that's constantly changing. And you never know when you have to run into a situation where you just kind of have to like learn a completely new kind of topic to fulfill a brief. And, at the very least, by kind of, clashing with and struggling and wrestling with all these different concepts and tools, hopefully that will kind of teach you kind of the character and the value of kind of like remaining in flux, so to speak. That it's always about learning and relearning throughout the whole span of your career. So not to get too philosophical on that, but it's a journey.
Do you want the other two presenters to address the same question? Danielle or Anna, if you want to address the question.
This is Anna. In regards to prerequisites, I think we just meet the students where they are. And so my project is flexible. I could teach this process to first semester BFA students, or it works with graduate students. And I would just adjust what the application is to suit both the class and the time limit and the students' skills. So yeah, just meet the students where they are. And then I like to show a lot of examples of work that that they can aspire to, meet in terms of typographic sophistication and all of that?
I think the prerequisites when we're thinking about interactivity in the interactive class, this project that I talk about accessibility is to sophomores, and I feel like a lot of what I'm doing is toning them down, that they want to put everything in the kitchen sink in their design. We do a branding sheet so they can stay focused on their set colors and typefaces and icons that they design. But then implementing it and actually seeing it on the screen and seeing what others think about it in the usability testing, I found to be the most valuable to them. Not only me telling them what I think is accessible, but for them to get their parents and roommates' opinions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I usually run into the issue of, you never know what you're gonna get coming to class, and some departments don't communicate as well. We all know that. You don't know what design principles are coming from, or you don't know if you have that conversation with other professors and what to expect. So you end up kind of reteaching certain things, and I think these responses were great. Thank you. It's very helpful.
Yeah. Okay, I'm looking at the time, but I also see a question. So I'm going to address the question very quickly, and we're supposed to take a break before we come back to the next part of the event. The question is about my process when I was putting together the keyword journey. To be honest, a big part of my process was making the data set of all the keywords. So I spent a long time just collecting stuff and then listing possible tools to try, a little bit open-ended, but trying to go back to the main research question to say, so like what can we learn through those keywords? So it was a lot of trial and error testing, opening up Boyan tools, putting all those words in there, seeing their default visualizations, trying to understand what the tool does, how the tool works, how it analyzes information, and then figuring out what other tools would be better for this question. So that was pretty much the process: collecting, testing tools, putting the same list of words into other tools, reading through the results, trying to go back a little bit, not believing too much the AI tools specifically to see, is this true or not? And then thinking about, I think I need to talk to people that work with visualization. So that was pretty much the process. But was also going from the general to the specific, trying to go from a very high level macro view of things and trying to zoom in and trying to understand the specifics. So we need to close this part of the event. Do you want to?
Yeah, because we're going to take a little break here, I think for like a half an hour, but at 3:15, Silas is presenting in person, and then we have Kyla and Javier also going to present in person, and 2 more online presentations. Oh, and Robin, I'm so sorry.
Right after Silas.
Right after Silas. So sorry, Robin.
So
Fast
3:15,
reading.
right?
Yes, so 3:15 we're back, Silas, then Robin, and then 2 online, 2 in person. So everybody online come back at 3:10. Everybody here come back at 3:10.